An apology from Greg Wallace after comments the Prime Minister called misogynistic. The BBC presenter had blamed his growing problems on what he called middle-class women of a certain age, following allegations of inappropriate behaviour. The backlash was immediate and at the highest level. So today, Greg Wallace said sorry.
I wasn't in a good headspace when I posted it. I've been under a huge amount of stress, a lot of emotion. I felt very alone, under siege.
Wallace says he will be stepping back from public view while an investigation into his conduct continues. Despite calls to pull MasterChef off air, the BBC insists the show will go on. Also tonight. Jail, the gang behind the UK's biggest ever drug smuggling operation that peddled addiction, misery and death.
We have dismantled one of, if not the largest, organised crime group involved in Class A distribution into all four corners of the United Kingdom.
After breaking his word, a backlash. Joe Biden pardons his son Hunter's tax and gun crimes, prompting accusations of hypocrisy. At 7, the misery and suffering of inflammatory bowel disease. A special report on the growing problem of diagnosis and care of a condition that's on the rise. And Speedo Mick, the musical. After the fundraiser hangs up his trunks, his charity legacy lives on.
You know, it's been a long journey for me, and it's going on stage in my hometown.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. MasterChef's Greg Wallace apologised today for claiming complaints about his behaviour came from a handful of middle-class women of a certain age. He said he will now take some time out. Well, it came after Downing Street entered the row and called his comments misogynistic. One senior MP also put pressure on the BBC to pull the programme, saying watching it could be triggering to any victim. But the BBC is standing firm tonight and says this evening's episode of MasterChef will be broadcast despite the growing scandal. Ellie Pitt has the latest on the row.
Chefs, you've had 1 hour. You've got 45 minutes left.
This episode of MasterChef will be shown on the BBC tonight, while one of its presenters, Greg Wallace, is investigated for sexually inappropriate behaviour. It was filmed months ago, but there have been calls for it not to be aired today.
It does seem odd to continue as normal, so I would say at the very least it needs some sort of warning that this was filmed before the current allegations came, they are being investigated, or there is an argument out of respect to the complainants, it could just be paused.
I've been under a huge amount of stress.
This afternoon he apologised, not for his alleged behaviour, but for his initial response to the allegations.
I can see the complaints coming from a handful of middle-class women of a certain age.
It was these comments at the weekend that Downing Street called misogynistic today.
What's the most difficult bit of this dish?
I think, to be perfectly honest, there are so many elements.
MasterChef contestants like Ulrika Johnson said his words left her seething because, as she put it, women over 50 are some of the hardiest out there. The BBC says it has looked into claims made by 13 individuals from 5 different shows across nearly 2 decades. In 2011, journalist Kirsty Walk complained to the production company that makes MasterChef that he told sexualised jokes during filming. The following year, actress Emma Kennedy reported that he allegedly touched another woman inappropriately. In 2017, broadcaster Asma Mir says she wrote to the BBC about comments he made. And Ulrika Johnson says Mr. Wallace was forced to apologise after making a rape joke on set. That year and the next, he was warned about his conduct by the BBC. But it seems the problems continued because in 2022, the broadcaster got another letter containing multiple allegations.
Well, it's deeply troubling if the BBC have received reports over the years that they haven't investigated and dealt with swiftly. Little wonder that our members feel concerned about putting their head above the parapet. If their complaints are not going to be investigated and that no action will follow, then it's likely that they will continue to feel nervous about reporting bad behaviour.
Greg Wallace has stepped back from the show while his behaviour is scrutinised, but tonight the BBC schedule will not be interrupted by another review into one of its presenters.
And I'll be really impressed.
Well, Ellie, this is all interesting stuff, and is it coming to the boil, you might say? The Downing Street said that those comments were misogynistic, and yet tonight the BBC says the show must go on.
Mary, that's the line they're taking tonight, it seems. There are 3 episodes that are due to go out this week. And that's despite immense pressure from high-profile broadcasters, politicians, and, as you say, Downing Street making these comments about misogyny. It seems that the BBC is backing one of their flagship shows, even if that means appearing to back one of its presenters that's currently being investigated by the production company, Banijay, that makes MasterChef, and who's been accused of making misogynistic comments by Downing Street. Look, the BBC are not unfamiliar with dealing with allegations of historical misconduct. It appears that this is how they're choosing to deal with the latest one.
OK, Ellie Pitt, thank you. Moving on now, the National Crime Agency has hailed its success in convicting 18 members of an international gang which smuggled in billions of pounds worth of drugs into the country. The NCA says it is the UK's biggest ever drugs investigation. The gang smuggled around 50 tonnes of heroin, cocaine and cannabis into the country, which was distributed from South East England to Scotland. 2 criminal trials were needed to try the defendants. Now, the judge who presided over them said the drug smuggling was an industrial and hitherto unprecedented scale. Our correspondent Peter Smith has the story.
The knock on the door that brought down a drugs empire.
Please, open the door.
This was the ringleader, Paul Green, but he led a double life. On the surface, a family man living the quiet suburban life in Cheshire. In fact, he was running the biggest drug trafficking gang ever detected in the UK. So big, Green was a wholesale supplier for Britain's drug dealers. In the underworld, he was known as the Big Fella. A 3-year investigation found evidence his gang imported as much as £7 billion worth of drugs, and National Crime Agency surveillance caught his foot soldiers trying to open bank accounts to hide the money. Today, the final members of Green's gang of 18 were convicted after England's longest ever criminal trial. This footage captures one of their shipments being loaded onto lorries in Holland. It was a hallmark of Green's gang to cover their drugs with strong-smelling food, like onions, to throw sniffer dogs off the scent as the product was moved to the UK. This warehouse in Sheffield is one of the locations Green's gang used to get their shipments in. It was called Erenka Foods, but that was just one of many fake business fronts they had. Some were even VAT registered to give an air of legitimacy. So even the lorry drivers had no idea they were being used as drug mules. The scale of this was so huge, at one point the gang ended up with more onions than they could get rid of from their warehouses. So they started exporting their own rotting vegetables back to Holland and reusing them in shipments. It was at this point one lorry driver smelled a rat. Instead of delivering his cargo, he took it back to the depot where police found 8 kilograms of cocaine inside. As pictures show, the drugs were in branded packaging. This, police discovered, was actually a code for their customers. The different branding indicated which drug dealer it was to be sent on to.
Police, open up!
Having built the case, the NCA went after Green's gang one by one.
Last chance, open the door!
You could compare it to a multinational company.
The head of this investigation said even he was shocked to uncover the full extent of Green's operation.
We have dismantled one of, if not the largest, organised crime group involved in Class A distribution into all 4 corners of the United Kingdom. There is no doubt that if you have witnessed the harm in your communities that the drug dealing causes and drug addiction, that some of these drugs will have stemmed from Paul Green and his organised crime group.
The judge in this case said it was drug smuggling on an industrial and until now unprecedented scale for Britain. Paul Green has been sentenced to 32 years in prison. He will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. Peter Smith, ITV News, Manchester.
President Joe Biden is facing a backlash after breaking his word by issuing his son Hunter a pardon for federal crimes. Hunter was facing a jail term for convictions on gun and tax charges, but his father, who had previously said he would not be pardoning him, said that politics had infected the process and it had become a miscarriage of justice. The President-elect Donald Trump blasted the decision as an abuse of justice. Here's our correspondent Robert Moore with the latest.
Joe Biden arrived in Angola a short time ago, having made one of the most notable reversals of his presidency. Reporter questions conveniently drowned out by Air Force One. After years of insisting he would never interfere in the justice system, the president has done just that, issuing an extraordinary, unconditional pardon for his son Hunter, covering an entire decade. It ends at a stroke the prosecution of Hunter Biden on both gun and tax evasion charges. The president's troubled son has long faced legal and personal challenges. He was addicted to crack cocaine for many years. These pictures were found on his laptop. And critics also accuse him of profiting from his father's position.
I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
What makes this so damaging for Biden's legacy is that he long promised the American people he would never take such action.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
Many of his allies, indeed his own spokeswoman, insisted a pardon was out of the question.
Does the president have any intention of pardoning him?
We've been asked that question multiple times. Our answer stands, which is no.
Democrats will have little scope now to criticize Donald Trump's pardons. The president-elect hinting he will issue some on day one. Posting overnight, does the pardon given by Joe to Hunter include the January the 6th hostages, who have now been in prison for years? Such an abuse and miscarriage of justice.
And Hunter Biden will be charged no matter what.
One reason the president may have acted to help his son is that this man, Kash Patel, has just been nominated by Trump to lead the FBI.
We got to put in all America patriots top to bottom.
Patel has said he wants to investigate and prosecute the Biden family and even liberal journalists.
We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out. But yeah, we're putting you all on notice.
This sense that revenge and retribution is just weeks away may have prompted Biden's decision to put family ahead of country.
Well, Robert, President Biden facing accusations of hypocrisy from pretty much all sides, isn't he?
Well, that's right. Republicans clearly expressing outrage. That's predictable. But Democrats, I think more tellingly, are also feeling distinctly uncomfortable. After all, Joe Biden framed his entire presidency around the ideas of him being honest, of non-interference in the judicial process, and also expressing contempt for Trump's thesis that the judicial system had become politically motivated and weaponized. And yet, if you look at Joe Biden's statement last night justifying the pardon, you know, he takes the language from Trump's playbook. He talks about a miscarriage of justice. He talks about selective prosecution. He talks about raw politics infecting the process. I think what we're seeing, in essence, is the White House circling the wagons around the Biden family, a recognition that that talk by Trump of retribution and revenge on the campaign trail may be a lot more than just rhetoric. You know, you look at those nominees to the Attorney General position and to the nominee to be FBI director, and there's real concern that Donald Trump may go after and investigate and prosecute those he has called the enemy within. So if you like, Mary, this is essentially the Biden family maximizing their legal protections 49 days before the inauguration.
Robert Moore in Washington, thank you. Well, here, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has said there are no excuses over a series of failures in the care of 5-year-old Yusuf Mahmoud Nazir. He died 8 days after being sent home from Rotherham Hospital. A report into his death by NHS South Yorkshire claimed his care had been appropriate. But Yusuf's family rejected this and say he should have been admitted to hospital. Today, they met the Health Secretary after a new investigation was announced into his death. Here's our North of England reporter, Amy Welsh.
5 years old and full of life. But Yusuf Nazir died just days after being sent home from hospital despite struggling to breathe.
Somebody shouldn't have to suffer for other people's errors and mistakes.
And today his family's fight for a fresh investigation into what went wrong got government backing.
Just to get a sense from you about where you think things are, what you want to get out of the second investigation.
As Health Secretary Wes Streeting sat down with Yusuf's uncle, telling him there was no excuse for such appalling failures.
We just need them to investigate them and give us the answers, and give us the answers on why they happened and what happened to Yusuf and why it happened, and what's going to be done, more importantly, to change it from happening to any other person.
Yusuf went to the doctors with a sore throat on the 15th of November 2022 and was given antibiotics. That evening he was taken to Rotherham Hospital, where after waiting for 6 hours he was diagnosed with severe tonsillitis and sent home. His condition worsened, and on the 18th of November he was taken via ambulance to Sheffield Children's Hospital. 5 days later, after suffering multi-organ failure and several cardiac arrests, he died. A previous NHS report found Yusuf's care at Rotherham Hospital was appropriate, something his family didn't accept.
If you never come to admit that there's a problem, or if you keep saying everything's fine, then you're never going to come to a resolution, and unfortunately it's going to keep leading to fatalities.
And while the hospital say they'll continue to cooperate with ongoing investigations, Yusuf's family say the truth is the only way of ensuring other children a safer future. Amy Welch, ITV News.
Rebel forces in Syria have continued their advance after taking the country's second city, Aleppo. Fighters opposed to President Bashar al-Assad launched the offensive on Wednesday. The civil war began during the Arab Spring in 2011, but there has been a relative uneasy peace in the country for the last 4 years. The insurgency is led by a jihadi group which previously had links to al-Qaeda and the so-called Islamic State. The Syrian government says it has created a strong defensive line against the advance. Well, here the Home Secretary has announced the previous Conservative government has accused them of allowing an entire criminal smuggler industry to be built around small boat crossings. Speaking to MPs, Yvette Cooper said she's already seen success in returning those who have no right to stay in the UK. It came as official figures show that 20,000 migrants have entered the UK via the Channel since Sir Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. Our political correspondent Harry Horton is in Westminster. Harry, the row continues.
Yeah, that's right. And although the number of people arriving via a small boat across the English Channel is down from the record high levels we saw 2 years ago, it is up on last year. And as you say, over the weekend, it topped 20,000 people arriving since July the 4th, when Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. Now, in the House of Commons just a little bit earlier, the Conservatives were keen to blame the new government, said it was actions they've taken that meant crossings have been so high in recent months. Labour said it was the fault of the previous government and its failure to tackle this issue over many years.
Dangerous small boat crossings rose from 300 people in 2018 to an average of over 36,000 a year in the last 3 years, a 120-fold increase. And in just a few short years, an entire criminal smuggler industry built around boat crossings has been allowed to take hold along the UK border.
We see her record and her government's record, a 64% increase in small boat crossings since the same period before the election, 6,000 extra people in hotels.
Well, one of the first actions of the new Labour government was to scrap the Conservatives' Rwanda plan. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, today said that had cost almost £700 million to send just 4 volunteers to Rwanda. In its place, Labour have put more focus, giving more powers to police to crack down on smuggling gangs. And last week they announced a new deal with Iraq, where they would give that country money in order to share more intelligence and bolster border security. But ministers, although they're putting a lot of blame on the previous government, they know that very soon they will be judged on their own record on this issue.
Harry Horton in Westminster, thank you. Well, there is plenty more still to come in the ITV Evening News, including the government announces a new deadline to remove dangerous building cladding, but tenants say they are still living in fear.
We've lived for years now since Grenfell with the fear that if our building goes up, how do we actually get out? Are we actually safe?
And the residents forced from their homes after a 50-foot sinkhole appears on a housing estate. Well, we'll be back with that and more after the break. See you then. Hello again, welcome back. Landlords have been given a deadline of 2029 to remove or repair buildings with dangerous cladding or face the risk of jail. The government has set out a new plan to fix the long-running scandal, which was prompted by the death of 72 people in the Grenfell Tower disaster. The campaigners say the announcement will make little difference. Sam Holder reports.
Neera and her neighbour Alex live knowing their homes are covered in flammable cladding. Despite it being confirmed 4 years ago, works have yet to start to fix the building.
We've lived for years now since Grenfell with the fear that if our building goes up, how do we actually get out? Because even our fire escapes are not safe.
Hundreds of thousands of people are stuck in buildings with unsafe cladding. Alongside fear, they face enormous insurance costs and service charges, and selling their homes is nearly impossible, like the 200 flats in Kate's development in Southampton.
Families are falling apart because of this, and that is a tragedy. You know, nobody wants that because of a financial issue.
7 years on from the Grenfell fire, which saw 72 lose their lives, the government has announced new deadlines for the problems to be fixed. Otherwise, landlords could face jail. Currently, only 30% of buildings identified with unsafe cladding have been fixed. By the end of 2029, every building more than 11 metres high will need to be, or at least have a date set for completion. Otherwise, landlords will face severe penalties, while buildings over 18 metres, which qualify for government schemes, will need to be fully fixed.
On the current trajectory that we've inherited as a government, it'll be into the 2040s before that's resolved. We don't think that's good enough. So the measures that we're announcing to Parliament today bring that forward to 2029.
For some, like dentist Ian Kendall, the plan is a relief.
That's great news that we're being listened to, supported, and hopefully we can get a move on this. Has been going on for such a long time and caused a lot of upset for many of the residents.
But the announcement has gone down terribly with cladding campaigners who say there's no real action, just more bureaucracy.
It's depressing, really, how underwhelming this announcement is. There's no real clarity about how those target dates will be enforced. There's some vague threat of penalties. It's still 5 years away from today, which will be 12 years after the Grenfell tragedy.
And the government accepts there may be around 7,000 more buildings with dangerous cladding which haven't even been identified yet. Sam Holder, ITV News.
The family of Dawn Sturgis has hit out at the former government and the actions of Wiltshire police over her death from Novichok poisoning. Lawyers said there had been an abject failure by the UK government to protect the public, and they accused the police of arrogantly and indeed wrongly stereotyping Dawn as a drug user when she'd first fallen ill. It came on the final day of the hearing into her death. Chloe Keedy was there. And Chloe, some very strong criticisms from Dawn's family.
That's right, Mary. You've really got a sense today of just how painful and difficult this whole process has been for the family of Dawn Sturgis, not least because they believe there were some really significant failings around her death. Firstly, by Wiltshire police officers, whose response today was described as arrogant, high-handed, dismissive, blinkered by an incorrect initial assumption that Dawn Sturgis was a known drug user. Now, the force has apologised for that, and its lawyers argued today that there's no evidence that that had any impact any impact on its investigation or on her medical treatment, but her family disagree and say they believe it could have cost her her life. Dawn Sturgis's death came 4 months after the attempted assassination, also with Novichok, of the Russian former double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia. And we heard today that Sergei Skripal was a sitting duck because there were no measures in place to protect him or his home, and that, we were told, amounted to an abject failure by the previous government to protect the UK public because of the enormous risk of collateral damage. Now, today was the final day of open hearings. We're expecting a report to be published sometime next year. Dawn Sturgis's family say they don't just want answers, they want some change to come from this. They want to know that she didn't die in vain.
Chloe Keedy in central London there. Thank you. Let's have a look at some other news now. And the Australian actor Ian Smith, best known for playing Harold Bishop on Neighbours, has revealed he has terminal cancer. The 85-year-old, who joined the long-running soap in 1987, announced that he has a rare and aggressive form of lung cancer. His last scenes in Neighbours will air next year. And authorities in the Greek islands of Rhodes and Lemnos declared a state of emergency today after powerful storms wreaked havoc over the weekend. 2 people were killed after torrential rain, which caused severe damage to homes and transport links. Dozens of firefighters from across Greece have travelled to the islands to support the relief efforts. Now here, 30 homes have been evacuated after a giant sinkhole appeared on a housing estate in Merthyr Tydfil. Alarmingly, the huge hole appears to be getting ever bigger. Hannah Thomas has more.
A hole in the middle of their houses. At the bottom, the water is rushing off the hillside. At the top, the gas and electricity cables are exposed to the elements. And Delith Mitchell fears the sinkhole could swallow up her house.
It's not just a house for us, it's a home. We've been here 35 years since it was built. Had some lovely times here, obviously. But racing around in the morning was one thing, but shutting that front door was emotional. But I mean, everybody was safe, and that's the important thing.
Delith and the other residents were evacuated yesterday. Among them were Alison and Idris Power. They say that many of their neighbours are elderly, but they had just 10 minutes to get out.
Lots of people are on medications. You've got to think of taking things as tablets. You know, we had to ring my daughter then, who lived in Rada, say, we're on our way down. We're evacuated from Nantmorlas.
But it's not the first that Merthyr Tydfil Council knew about the ageing culvert. The system under here is believed to be more than 100 years old. A council meeting was first held 15 years ago to discuss its condition. The current leader was an elected member at the time.
Repair work was done at that particular moment in time. In 2015, more repair work was done, but I would stress it wasn't in this particular spot. The first repair work was further down and the second repair work was further up towards the mountain. What I can assure people is the culvert is inspected every 2 years.
Tonight there's too much of a risk to send residents back to their homes as the sinkhole caused by a storm keeps getting bigger. Hannah Thomas, ITV News.
You are watching the ITV Evening News. It's a little bit after 7 o'clock and here's what's still ahead. Tai Fu, one of Britain's oldest tea companies, is saved in a £10 million rescue deal. We sit down with the stars of the Devil Wears Prada musical after Sir Elton John, who wrote the music, reveals he's lost his eyesight.
Elton is an incredible artist and has written some, you know, amazing numbers for this show. He's such an icon.
It's snowing. We're on our way to Inverness, but you're all jealous, aren't you?
And one man's story of hope will make it to the stage along with a pair of Speedos.
And if you didn't know, it's December. We are overlooking Regent Street this evening, so what's in store for all you shoppers? Well, a cold night ahead, but also stormier conditions for many of us come the end of this week. I have the full details in the national forecast. That's later in the programme.
But before all that, a special report on the alarming decline in care for those with inflammatory bowel disease. A survey shared with ITV News shows a big fall in the quality of help over the past 5 years. A survey of 17,000 patients by charity IBD UK found no service for the disease in the UK meets the standards for care or staffing. This leads to delays in treatment and diagnosis with sometimes very serious complications. 1 in 7 adults is only diagnosed once they make emergency hospital visits. And only 1 in 5 of those with IBD agree that they've been asked even about their mental health. Gary Davis heard from one patient who says nobody took her seriously until she was rushed into accident and emergency.
So I personally change my bag most days. Every day I have a shower. This is my stoma bag. I have a drainable bag.
Sophie Pearce has been living with her stoma and bag for 4 years. It's how her waste leaves her body. In 2020, she had her bowel removed after being diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. This daily ritual has given her a freedom she once thought impossible.
And we're done.
And it's life-changing.
Yeah. Absolutely life-changing. And you know, there could be so many comments on like, oh, your stoma's ugly or your stoma looks like this. It's like, does that really matter? Like, it saved my life.
Sophie suffered with debilitating symptoms for 14 years despite numerous GP and hospital visits. Eventually, growths called polyps were found in her bowel, but that didn't explain her condition.
I would say to my gastro consultant, like, I'm rectally bleeding like all the time. I've got diarrhea, urgency all the time. Stomach pain that has got me on my bathroom floor, like howling in pain. And multiple times he said to me, I'll just treat it topically for hemorrhoids.
One day she bled so heavily she had to be rushed to A&E, where she was sent straight to theatre.
The consultant that spoke to me as I came round from that said to me, this is the worst inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, I have ever seen. I did get an apology from my gastro consultant. He did ring me and he just said, I'm so sorry, I was so focused on the polyps that I oversaw the bowel disease.
Surrey and Sussex Healthcare Trust has also apologised for Sophie's diagnosis experience and says patient access to testing has since improved. Inflammatory bowel disease is an umbrella term for immune disorders which attack the gut, causing inflammation. There are 2 most common forms. Crohn's can lead to inflammation and ulcers anywhere along the digestive system, while ulcerative colitis usually affects the rectum or colon. There is no cure, but medication and lifestyle changes can help manage it.
How have you been?
Good, how have you been?
Oh.
Much of Chloe Meadows' adult life has played out on reality TV in The Only Way is Essex. But for years she kept her inflammatory bowel disease to herself, going public ahead of running this year's London Marathon for Crohn's and Colitis UK.
I just want people to not be embarrassed and to normalise going to the toilet and your habits and how healthy they are if they're not, because, you know, it can save your life. What's your experience of your treatment been like? Initially, when I was first diagnosed, it was amazing. They were so great, and I had this nurse and she was sort of my designated nurse. And she knew me personally and my story, and so she was very good at sort of helping me. Whereas I think post-COVID, the NHS are obviously so overrun now that I'm kind of just put to different people each time.
And that change is reflected in a report shared exclusively with ITV News, which shows the standard of IBD care in the UK has declined in the past 5 years. St Mark's in London is considered one of the leading IBD centres, but around the country, only 1 in 5 services now have enough specialist nurses.
We want to be seeing people in a timely manner. We set ourselves very high standards to try and see people in a timely manner because we know that these conditions are really impactful on people's quality of lives. But unfortunately, there's just waiting lists that we have to deal with.
For singer-songwriter Tom Spate, accessing timely treatment has been a challenge. He's recently finished his 4th album, having learnt to manage living with Crohn's, but spent 2 months in hospital while making his first.
Once I got diagnosed, you think you were in a system of being cared for, but I really wasn't. Like, there wasn't any aftercare. The NHS are an amazing thing when you're in a crisis, but when you're in this kind of like dull wake of having a chronic condition, it's really difficult to kind of keep up with everyone.
What are you doing?
Sophie is now doing all she can to make up for the 14 years she lost waiting for answers, and wants others to avoid the unnecessary suffering she endured.
It's a really fascinating report. But what did the Department of Health say about this?
Well, the department says that the government has inherited a broken NHS. It says that people suffering from inflammatory bowel disease aren't getting the care that they deserve. They insist they're going to change that. They say they've got a plan to improve diagnostic services. One of their promises is to invest £1.5 billion in new equipment. We've also heard from the NHS. A spokesperson there said that staff are diagnosing and treating more people with inflammatory bowel disease than ever before, but that demand means that they're trying their best to bring down wait times. Charity Crohn's and Colitis UK says that the 500,000 people suffering with IBD in the UK are currently being failed. They say that any improvements can't come soon enough.
OK, Carrie Davis, thank you. And if you want more details on this story, as well as help or indeed advice, head to our website, that's itv.com/news. OK, let's get an update on what's making the news tonight. And the BBC has confirmed it will continue to broadcast the current series of MasterChef, despite pressure to pull this evening's episode after the presenter Greg Wallace was accused of inappropriate sexual comments. Wallace apologised for dismissing his accusers as middle-class women of a certain age, saying he was not in a good place when he had made those comments. A gang which smuggled up to £7 billion worth of drugs into the UK has been jailed. 18 people were convicted after what the National Crime Agency said was the UK's biggest ever drugs investigation. And President Joe Biden has faced a backlash after he officially pardoned his son Hunter Biden, who's been convicted of gun charges and tax evasion. The president has previously said he would not pardon his son. Now here, Thai food tea has been rescued from administration. The vape manufacturer Supreme has bought the struggling firm for £10 million. Our West of England reporter Sangeeta Lal is in Bristol, where the company is based. And this is good news, isn't it, Sangeeta, for lovers of the brand?
Absolutely. There isn't a person alive today who hasn't been brought up with Thai food as an option on the shelves. But that's very nearly changed last week when the 121-year-old company went into administration after several years of declining sales and mounting debt. Now, it was quickly one of the UK's main brands, backed by Cilla Black in the 80s and many other well-known slogans after that. But last year, its sales fell by about £8 million, according to its latest figures, partly down to a change in drinking habits, with younger consumers turning to coffee and growing trends like bubble tea, but also partly down to what its new owner has described as bad luck. After Thai Food's site on the Wirral last year was broken into, the company said extensive damage was caused. It had to close that site and relocate to here in Bristol. But Thai Food's debts have essentially ballooned to more than the value of its assets. But today, a vapes and batteries company called Supreme has taken over this historic brand. It was the first pre-packaged tea to be sold in the UK, founded in 1903 by a grocer called John Summer, who wanted to help his sister with indigestion. Tea soothed her stomach pains, and he named it Thai Food after the Mandarin word for doctor. It quickly became one of the UK's biggest and main tea brands. No indication yet of what will happen to the staff, believed to be fewer than 100 employees, but they, along with many other people, will be hoping that Thai Food continues to be a leading tea brand, along with Tetley, PG Tips and Yorkshire Tea.
OK, Sangeeta Lal in Bristol, thank you. Queen Camilla is going to miss some parts of a state visit by the Qatari monarch as she continues to recover from a viral chest infection. She had been due to attend an outdoor event on Horse Guards Parade tomorrow alongside the King, but she's going to take time to recover at home on the advice of doctors. She contracted the infection after her visits to Australia and Samoa in October. She's hoping to be present for lunch and banquet events later in the day. Sir Elton John has revealed he hasn't been able to see his new musical, The Devil Wears Prada, because he's lost his eyesight. The 77-year-old star wrote the music but suffered a severe infection in his right eye earlier this year, which left him blind. Speaking at the premiere of the new show, Sir Elton said there is some hope that it will improve in future. Here's our entertainment reporter, Rishi Davda.
I haven't been able to come to many of the previews because, as you know, I've lost my eyesight, so it's hard for me to see it.
For nearly a decade, Sir Elton John carefully crafted another musical masterpiece. But as he told the audience last night, he's unable to enjoy The Devil Wears Prada as intended, as he continues to struggle with his eyesight, an issue he opened up about last month.
I unfortunately lost my eyesight in my right eye in July because I had an infection in the south of France. And it's been 4 months now since I haven't been able to see. And my left eye is not the greatest, so I'm kind of stuck at the moment because I can do something like this, but going into the studio and recording, I don't know.
It was Behind the Keys where he brought the adaptation to life, a story of an infamous fashion boss and her eager to please assistants.
And you select, I don't know, that lumpy blue sweater, for instance.
First a book, then a film, best known for starring Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway and Emily Blunt.
A legend.
The new show's running at London's Dominion Theatre until May. Its cast thankful for the help of one of entertainment's biggest stars.
Elton is an incredible artist and has written some, you know, amazing numbers for this show. He's such an icon.
Yeah, and he's extremely generous. And
So
it's
generous.
the soundtrack of my childhood.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like a parent, like, oh my God, is he happy? Is he pleased? And he is so happy with everything about this production.
The 77-year-old has been forced to slow down in recent years, undergoing hip and knee surgeries.
And finally, #1.
He tried to be as involved as possible in the musical, but ongoing health issues have seen him take more of a back seat, though his impact is obvious.
Insane vocals, beautiful music, and you can really hear Elton in the music, which is amazing.
If it's a story that you don't know,
Yeah.
it's, you know, if you've never seen the film, you still come away, I'm hoping that you still come away fulfilled with the story, that you go and watch the film.
And boy, it sounded good tonight, okay?
The singer said he's trying everything to improve his vision, but even if he couldn't see the show, he'll have certainly heard the cheers. Rishi Davda, ITV News.
Still to come on the programme before Emmerdale.
I just felt so proud, got really emotional.
From active addiction to raising more than £1 million for charity. The Liverpudlian whose life is being made into a musical.
And a cold night set against the backdrop of twinkling lights. The temperature might be dipping, but we're expecting a milder and stormier end to this week. All those details coming up in a couple of minutes.
Okay, well, do join Alex and me for that after the break. We'll see you then. Hello again, welcome back. Time for the weather now, and Alex is in a very Christmassy Regent Street for us tonight. Good weather for shopping, I'm hoping, Alex.
It is good weather for shopping, Mary, but it is pretty cold. So if you're coming down here in the next hour or so, I would grab an extra layer. But it's a good evening. At least it's very dry, but you cannot help but notice the twinkling lights behind me. Yes, this is the famous Regent Street, and what you can see now are the spirits of Christmas, which have been a permanent Christmas fixture over the last few years. They stretch all the way down Regent Street. In fact, they've been displaying Christmas lights on Regent Street since 1954, which makes this year its 70th year. They certainly are feeling pretty Christmassy down there. I popped down earlier, but everyone is wrapped up in big coats, some scarves and also some hats as well, because the temperature is dropping, as you may well have heard. Let's take a look actually at our nighttime temperatures rurally. That's where temperatures will be coldest tonight. As we push further north, we start to get into those very freezing temperatures down to maybe -8 to -10 across some sheltered parts of Scotland. So a widespread sharp frost in these areas, probably further south escaping much of a frost, but certainly a cold night all round. But that's not it. As we head through the next few days, we're expecting more changes to push in. We're going to go from cold conditions to milder conditions, but also quite wet and windy. We've got 2 areas of low pressure to watch out for. One on Thursday, which could whip up the winds, but also Saturday, a deep area of low pressure, so stormy conditions potentially for this coming weekend. No warnings in place as of yet, but that could well change as we head through the next couple of days. We'll keep you updated on all of this, but as for the forecast, right now, let's take a look.
Visibility may be low this evening as the cold weather hits. Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
Well, as we head through the course of this week, initially it is going to be on the cold side with some sharp frost, particularly tonight. But as we get towards the middle part of this week, really from Thursday onwards, it will start to turn more unsettled, quite wet and windy. And as I mentioned before, we are expecting it to be quite stormy as we get to next weekend. Let's take a look at the conditions for this evening, and it is getting quieter through today across the north. We've had a band of rain which has been making its way southwards. Some of that rain has been on the wintry side up over the tops of the hills in Scotland and perhaps the Pennines, but it is getting much lighter at the moment. But as I say, a cold night, particularly where we've got those clearing skies, so temperatures widely below freezing across the north, but further south, touch more cloud. That will keep temperatures on the plus side, so we'll escape much of a frost here, but still a chilly night all round. So heading into tomorrow, certainly a cold start to the day, but also a bright one. Plenty of wintry sunshine as we head through. However, in the afternoon, we'll start to see cloudier skies pushing in across the northwest of Britain and also down towards the southwest. In the northwest, the leading edge of that rain is likely to turn on the wintry side. Temperatures, as you can see, particularly for central and eastern parts, pretty chilly, so highs are just 5 or 6 degrees Celsius, so make sure you do wrap up warm tomorrow. Similar picture as we head into Wednesday, but on Wednesday night into Thursday, the first area of low pressure arrives, so things turning unsettled, quite wet and windy.
Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
So certainly unsettled at the end of this week, Mary. As I say, stormy conditions, and we'll keep everyone posted if there are going to be those warnings issued in the next couple of days.
OK, thanks, Alex. And finally tonight, Speedo Mick, as you've never seen or indeed heard him before. The fundraising exploits of the Liverpudlian, who we featured on ITV News many times over the years, is being turned into a musical. Scouse Stomper will chart how Mick turned his life around from addiction and raised £1 million walking across the country in just his boots and, of course, crucially, those swimming trunks. He told Mahdir Pasha what it means to him.
For a whole decade, he has graced our screens as one of the country's most iconic fundraisers. From walking the entire length of the country to swimming the English Channel, Michael Cullen, or Speedo Mick as he became known, has raised over £1 million for charity, and he's done it with his chest out as well as his scantily covered backside. And now his story is set to reach new heights in the form of a musical at a theatre in his birthplace of Liverpool.
Oh, my heart was pounding, and it was pounding all day long, do you know what I mean? And you know, it's a scary prospect to think that it's going to be on stage, you know. But when that diminished, I just felt so proud, got really emotional.
He describes his story as one of hope after turning his life around from addiction and homelessness. Speedo Mick's fundraising has brought with it a number of achievements. He was awarded Liverpool's Citizen of Honour in May, and the Everton FC fanatic became Fan of the Year in 2016. But this recognition feels different.
it's on top of the list, really, you know what I mean? To have my tale told, you don't get many people's tales told. I'll never ever forget, you know what I mean, where I'd lost all my dreams, lost all my hopes and my family and everything else.
Last year, at the age of 59, Speedo Mick hung up his knickers after bracing a very cold 1,000-mile walk for the last time. Retirement might look a little different for the Scouser, but he plans on continuing his charitable work through his organisation, the Speedo Mick Foundation, and spending more time with his admiring grandkids.
I feel like he's a wonderful role model.
Oh, me.
Mahathir Pasha, ITV News.
And that is all from us for now. Paul's here after I'm a Celebrity, but from me and the Evening News team, bye-bye.